Alan Karpick on our Sunday conversation with Brian Neubert and Tom Dienhart. And always a lot to talk about, especially with the fact that we have the start of training camp or fall camp or whatever you want to call it, late fall camp, early fall camp. I want to thank our sponsor, and that's the Purdue Union Club Hotel. And if you're go to Golden Black, we have a little tag on our message boards for more information about the watch parties. That's the new thing that they are going to have watch parties at the Union Club. You aren't going to be able to go to the games, but you can come and spend a weekend in West Lafayette and spend time at the Union Club, all socially distanced, but that will be for each of the 4 home games. That includes, obviously, the first one, which will be October 24th. So the weekend of the October 24th, you can make reservations at the Purdue Union Club Hotel for watch parties for Purdue, Iowa, and I guess what's the other home games? Northwestern, Nebraska, and Rutgers, right? I haven't put all this to memory yet, but I think that's correct. It's not in that order. It's Rutgers and then Nebraska. But anyway, guys, we have always a lot to talk about. Obviously, Tom, with the start of training camp, we had heard Jeff Brom on Wednesday after practice. You heard the quarterback coaches and coach, Brian Brom, and, of course, the 3 quarterbacks that are in contention. What's the early vibe from your perspective? I know we're doing this via Zoom, so we're not at practice, but what'd you glean from the first couple of days of media availability?
Yeah, quarterback's always a hot talking point for any team. And as we all know, for the first time since 2016, Purdue's season opening starting quarterback will not be named Elijah Sindelar. Of course, back in 16, it was David Blau. So who's it going to be, right? I mean, it's basically a 3-man race from what we can all glean and surmise. Jack Plummer, the redshirt sophomore, of course, redshirt junior Aiden O'Connell, and the wild card, as I like to say, of the bunch, the UCLA grad transfer, also a redshirt junior, Austin Burton. So it will be interesting, guys. There's plenty of competition. We know Jeff Brom, every coach loves competition. And, Brian Brom's not tipping his hand. I asked him if there's a pecking order right now. There's not. I asked him how soon could they name a starter. Of course, they're nowhere near doing that. They have a couple scrimmages coming up in ensuing weeks. He said after those scrimmages, obviously the picture will be more clear, guys. But if you had to back me into a corner and ask me to pick the presumptive number 1, I don't think it's any shock to think that guy's probably going to be Jack Plummer. Who would be Jack Plummer?
Brian, you obviously have watched these guys from afar, not afar. You've been right there watching closely, I should say. And certainly Jack Plummer in 6 starts, I believe it was last year, showed us some things. So did Aiden O'Connell. And we know that, but do you look at this and say, Jeff Brom has been used to playing 2 quarterbacks, kind of playing the hot guy in some ways with Sindelar. I know injuries have also played into that too, but there have been instances when Sindelar and Blau went to shared games early on, et cetera. So how do you view this situation from your perspective?
Well, I think the optimal situation is that you always have a guy is your guy. I know coaches like competition. That's obviously a very important element to preparing a team for a season. But Purdue doesn't seem to have a clear-cut guy right now. I do think Jack Plummer did enough positive things last year to think that he's on an upward trajectory, provided he's healthy, which by every indication he is. I think Aiden O'Connell did a lot of positive things for you in a pinch. Last year, as Tom said, Austin Burton is the wild card. My assumption, as seems to be Tom's, is that because Jack Plummer was the guy before he got hurt, I think he's a little bit more physically talented than Aiden O'Connell. I think he probably gets right of first refusal here. It might not be by a wide margin. But you do go into a season like this where you have 3 guys and it's relatively close, and we don't know how quickly Austin Burton can close this gap to where he can credibly get into a quarterback competition for this job. I mean, obviously the learning curve is the big issue there. You get into the situation where the separation isn't quite, what it might be if you had an established guy. You start getting into the season, and if the guy you pick doesn't play well, you start to ask yourself all those same questions, and you wonder if you shouldn't revisit things. Back in 2017, remember, he played both Sindelar and David Blau by design, and his stated purpose for that was to make sure that both guys were ready if they were both needed. And it worked out beautifully because it turned out both guys were needed, both that season and the next season. That 2017 season was kind of a house money sort of year for Purdue. Obviously, not much was expected of them, so you probably could have afforded to do a little bit of outside the box type of stuff. Now that you have Rondell Moore and David Bell, and you have expectations, so to speak, albeit in a very unconventional year. I don't know how willing you would be to tinker quite as much, but you don't have this. It doesn't seem like there's any scenario where you have the sort of separation where you know who your guy is maybe every single week, unless Jack Plummer or whoever it may be just, kind of blows it out of the water during kind of this mid-fall camp. You kind of wonder about whether or not he would play multiple guys, or you wonder about how secure that starting job would be if the first game or two of the season don't go as planned. The optimal situation is obviously you have a clear-cut guy that you're absolutely positively committed to no matter what. That doesn't seem to be Purdue's reality, and that could create some pretty interesting dynamics here these first few weeks of the season.
One thing, Tom, you have to bet on is that Purdue knows, and Jeff Brom knows more than anyone, and his staff, that this team's offense runs through two guys, Rondale Moore and David Bell, at least from the outset. You like, the Austin Burton, Brom talked a little bit about liking that mobility. We've talked about that a lot, but it truly is the guy that can sling it. And we know that they like to throw it downfield. And this, with those two weapons, you're going to want to do that. I mean, is it as simple as the one that can execute the downfield passing game the best, or could it become situational?
Yeah, Brian said it a lot of times. Any quarterback for Jeff Brom is going to have to be able to throw that football downfield. It's always going to be an element of his offense. And you're exactly right, Alan. The quarterback's got to get the ball to those two playmakers and Moore and Bell. Now, Jack Plummer said after practice last week that one area he's tried to get better at is those progressions, reading through the first progression, second and third progression, and also trying to stay more calm in the pocket. As far as Aiden O'Connell goes, guys, he said that obviously he wants to try to improve his footwork. I don't think he never thinks he's going to be real fleet of foot or elusive, but he's tried to enhance his ability to be a little bit more escapable and nimble in the pocket. But we know he can throw the football. Boy, I tell you what, very impressive in those 3 late season starts for O'Connell. And then there's Austin Burton, guys. And the one theme that it seems to be a fact that everybody talks about when you mention Burton is the fact he's been a quick study here. He's picked up things very well. And his teammates have said that, his fellow quarterbacks, and Brian Brom said just as much as well. So again, this guy seems to have adapted quickly. Chemistry has got to be developed with those wide receivers, guys. But it's going to be interesting to see once these scrimmages take place, who does what. But again, like you alluded to, Alan, I think the winner of this derby is going to be the guy who proves most effective at delivering those balls downfield to the two big playmakers to move the football and get points on the board.
And I think that's obviously a huge factor in Purdue. You'll hear from Bob Diaco and company later today. So we'll have that on the site as well later on Sunday, I should say. And that, again, the defense is going to have to do some things. But Brian, it's, and it's hard to know how this year is going to go because of the truncated season and what's going to become. Are the defenses going to be ahead of the offense? Who knows? I mean, do you have any view of what we might see in this? We have a little bit of a snapshot of what we've seen in the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC to date. I'm not sure what trends we're seeing, though, from offense versus defense and being ready to play.
Yeah, I mean, as I've said from the onset of the pandemic, I think that when college football was going to be played again, I thought the results were going to be as randomized as ever because I think the offseason was so messed up. I think, that can lead to preparation that's not quite what you need it to be. It can also lead to, potentially physical issues in terms of soft tissue injuries, whatever it may be. I don't know if the college football season thus far has proven that, but the NFL just had a little bit of a Sunday Bloody Sunday here last weekend. And, you just kind of wonder about all the circumstance that might come out of the circumstances here and what that might mean for the season. I don't know if an offense would be ahead of a defense. I think both sides are equally probably vulnerable to the unconventional circumstances here. All of these college football programs probably got more time to study and more time to meet virtually than ever before this offseason, but they didn't have time to practice. They weren't able to tackle. They didn't have functional, complete springs. They didn't have functional, complete winter training programs, conditioning programs. How much that shows up, I have no idea. But when you look at some of the results thus far in college football, the games that have been played, by the way, and not postponed or canceled, Oklahoma loses early. LSU loses early. Florida State's been a complete train wreck. I know Florida State's not what Florida State is typically, but it's been a complete disaster for them. How much of that has to do with the offseason, I don't really know, but it would seem like a coincidence that some of the best teams in college football are getting beat early in the season, the people they should be beating. So I guess we'll just kind of have to wait and see here what this offseason means for. And it'll be a little bit different in the Big Ten because obviously you ramped up to play in the first place for a couple of days, and then you just sat there through September, and so it's even a little bit different for the Big Ten. But results this year are probably going to be randomized more than ever. Injuries, outbreaks, whatever it may be, are going to matter.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing. And one of the things, and maybe our last topic for today, is just obviously the Big Ten has talked about, and Jeff Brom commented about not liking, and I think he said not liking the fact that there aren't going to be any fans or many fans in the stands. He wishes that was different. I think it's maybe a fine line. I don't think he's saying it, hey, I'm against that. I just said I understand that's the reality. I wish it was different. But we've seen fans in stands at Notre Dame. We've seen fans at stands at the Colts. We've seen fans in the SEC in some places and most places, and the ACC. Do we, again, COVID, everything can change in a minute. And do you have any sense, Tom, that the Big Ten could change its tune later? I guess maybe that's a rhetorical question because it changed its tune in a big light when it decided to play this season as well.
Yeah, probably going to depend on how things continue to progress from a virus standpoint, from community to community. Jeff talked about the fact or the absence of fans and the impact that could just have on his team emotionally, getting up for the game, getting fired up. We talked about that 2018 Ohio State game where Purdue throttled the Buckeyes 49-20, and the energy the crowd provided the Boilermakers that day, where Purdue won is in as lopsided a fashion if no fans were there. Would they won the game at all if no fans were there? Who knows? So just a big X factor here, guys. The home field advantage in 2020 seems to pretty much be null and void. That's good and bad, I guess, for when you go to places like Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State, there's no fans. But you don't have any of that energy at home. So that's what Jeff was talking about, I think, having to get his players up without help from the fans. So we'll see. Maybe it will change. I guess personally, I would kind of like to see at least the band and some students go. If general fans can go at some point, that'd be great. But again, it'd be kind of nice to see the band in there spread out and again, some students. But we'll see. Like I said, you never say never, Alan. Like you said, things can change. But for now, the plan is only for friends, I guess only for family members of players and staffers to be at these games.
Yes, around 600 fans. And I don't know. I've had questions about whether, when Iowa comes here, are they going to be able to bring their family and friends? I don't know. That's the other thing is, all the preparation. We don't know exactly what we're going to be able to do from a coverage standpoint. All these things will be answered in the next 3 weeks. But kind of like how we've had to deal with everything, Brian, we can't, you're not planning anymore. You're just waiting and reacting to what is given you. And that's kind of the way this is all done.
Yes, the virus remains in control of all of this. And, in the president's defense, obviously, I think everybody in an optimal world would like, there to be fans at these games. Fans would like to be at the games. The players, I'm sure, would like to be playing in animated stadiums. The presidents are trying to protect their campuses. I mean, these are like billion dollar enterprises here in higher education nowadays. And I can speak for Purdue when I say that they are hunting down apartment parties like a Terminator going back through time to try to eliminate John Connor. I mean, it is that is the nature of this right now. Students are being asked, in some cases required, to make social concessions unlike any other college class ever because of the virus. If the virus spreads and you have to shut down your university, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars in tuition money people have on the line. There's millions of dollars of university operations on the line. There's the simple enterprise of the reopening process for these universities. I know not every university does it the same, but I will also say that some universities take it more seriously than others. And, when you see the SEC, we know that part of the country's general approach to this whole thing is a little bit different than other places. But that's kind of where the presidents are coming from. I think, you also, a lot goes into having fans at games too. It isn't just spreading people out in the crowd. It's men's rooms, it's bathrooms, it's entrances and exits, it's cleaning the place when you're all done. And, there could be a practical consideration there too, where is it all worth it? I don't know. But hopefully through the course of the year, maybe if things improve through the course of the year, maybe they can say, hey, at the end of the year, we can have some fans. And then hopefully next year, everything returns to normal. But I think this was probably a pretty big concession that had to be made to get football played in the first place. These presidents do not want the university shut down because they let a couple of hundred students, into a football game.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly makes a lot of sense from the Big Ten's perspective. Okay, parting shots for this week, and Tom Dienhart, what are your thought processes? You're going to obviously have a lot of football coverage next week, but not only what you're thinking now, but what you're thinking down the road in terms of what we're going to see.
Yeah, like you said, more football, finding out more. I guess pulling the curtain back by talking to these coaches and players, hopefully discovering a little bit more about the 2020 Boilermakers, Alan. Moving forward, a lot of big questions to be answered for this team. We've discussed them in the past. The offensive line, the defense, of course, from front to back, a new scheme and a new coordinator. So yeah, there'll be plenty of coverage there, and again, a lot to still learn and glean from these players and these coaches.
Brian's sporting the new home field apparel, gold and black merchandise too,
Yeah.
which I love.
I'm a model, huh?
But what's not only what's up for you, but any other thoughts that you want to share as we wrap up this Sunday conversation?
Yeah, I'll just start with the plan for the site. Yesterday, I went straight from a basketball camp in Noblesville to a high school football game in Brownsburg. Saw a bunch of Purdue 2022 and 2023 basketball targets, but also then Purdue quarterback commitment Brady Allen. Have some stuff on the site now about all of that. We'll have more throughout the week. Also, basketball practice starts October 14th. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to every day do a little player breakdown on expectations, things like that. A clever little series to start basketball coverage 2 weeks before it starts. In terms of final thoughts, again, I'll say it at the end of all of these. I am happy that we're talking about, football again. I'm happy that we're going to be talking about basketball here pretty soon, and we're not talking about viral loads and asymptomatic carriers and Kevin Warren's botched handling of the initial cancellation of the Purdue or the postponement of the Big Ten season. It is nice to be talking about less divisive, less toxic sort of topics. So let's just keep doing that.
All right. Sounds good, guys. And we'll look forward to that all next week. We'll be back next Sunday as well on our Sunday conversation because it's Sunday. And we will make sure you also check out our podcast. If you're not a iTunes subscriber, please think about doing that. And we've got lots of Zoom interviews as well, kind of the new way of doing business. We want to thank our sponsor, and that, of course, is the Purdue Union Club Hotel. Make sure you check out the watch parties they're going to have for each of the Boilermakers 4 home games starting October 24th or the weekend of October 24th against the Iowa Hawkeyes. And we thank them for their sponsorship as well. And we look forward to next Sunday, and we look forward to a good week for everybody. And we look forward to next Sunday when we talk more Purdue sports on our Sunday conversation. Have a great week, everybody.